Many believe Ruth Ellis was a victim, but was she really? Or was she a calculated murderer? I do feel sympathy for her. She was a product of her time, but legally, she pulled the trigger. She fired those shots in cold blood, and for that, she was sentenced to die. In 1955, a brutal crime took place just outside this pub in Hampstead, London. The victim? A young man named David Blakely. But what truly shocked the public was the identity of his killer, his own lover, Ruth Ellis. What could possibly drive a woman to hunt down and execute the man she loved? Was she truly in control of her actions, or was there more to the story than what appeared in the headlines? The country was outraged. Even now, her story divides opinions. She went down in history as the last woman ever hanged in Britain. But to understand why she did what she did, we need to go back, long before that fateful night outside the Magdala pub. Ruth Ellis was born Ruth Nielsen in Rhyl, North Wales, on October 9th, 1926. She was one of 6 children raised in a modest working-class family. Her father, Arthur, was a struggling musician, and the family moved frequently as he searched for work. One man who has studied the case extensively is award-winning writer Lawrence Marks. He spoke to key witnesses for a book he co-authored in 1977. Ruth was a rebellious child. He tells me she wasn't academically inclined. Her family's financial situation was unstable. When her father had work, things were fine. When he didn't, life was tough. At 14, Ruth left school and moved with her family to London, where she found work in a factory. It was wartime, but for Ruth, the city wasn't a place of restrictions. It was an escape. The shy brunette soon dyed her hair platinum blonde, and by 16, she was frequenting London's dance halls, where she would meet her first love. It was 1943. Ruth was dancing when she met a Canadian soldier named Claire Andre. He wasn't especially handsome, but he had money to spend. He swept Ruth off her feet, showering her with gifts and taking her to expensive restaurants in Soho. Ruth was dazzled, says author Pip Granger, who has studied her life in depth. It was a world of glamour she had never known. British girls had spent years in wartime austerity, rationing, hand-me-down clothes, even using gravy browning to fake stockings. Claire Andre was a dream. Claire promised to marry Ruth, but it was a lie. What she didn't know, until her mother discovered the truth, was that he already had a wife and children back in Canada. At just 17, Ruth found herself pregnant and alone. This was the first time she experienced the sting of rejection, but it would not be the last. Rather than let herself be a victim, Ruth made a decision. She would take control of her life. Leaving her newborn son, Claire Jr., with her family, she returned to London to build a future for herself. Finding respectable work as a single mother in post-war London was nearly impossible. Desperate for money, Ruth took a job at a camera club. The job? Posing nude for amateur photographers. These weren't professional shoots, explains Lawrence Marks. Most of the men didn't even have film in their cameras. They just wanted to look. Ruth soon realized the power she held over men. Her striking blonde hair, her confidence, the way she carried herself. Men were drawn to her, and she knew it. This realization led her to the Court Club, a high-end venue in London's West End where she worked as a hostess. But this job required more than just selling drinks. Hostesses earned extra money by providing companionship to wealthy clients. She had crossed a line, says criminologist Professor David Wilson. Once she took that first step, the transition to escorting was an easy one, and it was lucrative. A factory job paid her £2 a week. At the Court Club, she made £20. Ruth had found a way out of poverty, but at a cost. While working at the Court Club, Ruth caught the eye of George Ellis, a well-off dentist. He was 21 years older than her and completely infatuated. But there was a problem. George was an alcoholic, Marks explains. There's a sense that Ruth believed she could control him. He wasn't like Claire Andre, who had abandoned her. This was a man she could hold on to. They married in a small registry office in Kent. There were no family or friends, only 2 strangers pulled from the street to act as witnesses. The marriage quickly soured. George accused Ruth of being unfaithful. She, in turn, accused him of seeing other women. The fights were vicious. Her jealousy was extreme, says Professor Wilson. When George was admitted to an alcohol rehabilitation center, Ruth convinced herself he was having affairs with the nurses. She would stake out the hospital, convinced he was lying to her. By 1951, the marriage had collapsed. Ruth left, pregnant once again. Her dreams of stability had fallen apart. Returning to her work as a hostess, Ruth found herself in a new social circle, the world of motor racing. It was here that she met David Blakely. "I did not like his manner from the start," Ruth later said. "Too upper class, too arrogant." But despite her first impression, they soon became inseparable. Blakely was younger than Ruth and came from a wealthy background, but his playboy lifestyle drained his inheritance. When his money ran out, he relied on Ruth for alcohol, for a place to stay, even for financial support. Their relationship was volatile. They were passionate but destructive, explains Marks. Huge arguments, dramatic reconciliations. It was a vicious cycle of love, violence, and obsession. When Ruth realized she was pregnant again, she thought it would change things. Instead, it ended in disaster. During one of their violent arguments, Blakely allegedly punched Ruth in the stomach. Days later, she miscarried. Something inside her snapped. By Easter weekend, 1955, Ruth had reached her breaking point. Blakely had promised to spend the holiday with her. Instead, he ignored her calls. Furious, she went looking for him. She found him drinking at the Magdala pub. As he stepped outside, Ruth was waiting. She pulled a loaded Smith & Wesson from her purse. "David," she called. He turned, just in time to see the gun. She fired once, twice. He staggered, fell. She stepped closer, fired 3 more times into his lifeless body. Then she turned the gun on herself. But the weapon jammed. As an off-duty officer rushed toward her, she calmly handed him the gun. "I am the police," he said. She nodded. "Call the police?" Ruth Ellis had done what she set out to do. She had killed the man she loved. With Ruth Ellis now in police custody, the reality of her crime began to sink in. She was taken to Hampstead Police Station, where she calmly confessed, "It's obvious when I shot him, I intended to kill him." There was no sign of remorse, just a cold, detached acceptance of what she had done. The police were stunned by her composure. But what drove her to that level of desperation? Was she a woman scorned, or was there something more sinister at play? The trial of Ruth Ellis began on June 20th, 1955, at the Old Bailey. It lasted a mere 2 days. The jury took just 23 minutes to find her guilty of murder. Under British law at the time, there was only one possible sentence: death by hanging. Despite public outcry and multiple petitions for clemency, the Home Secretary refused to intervene. On the morning of July 13th, 1955, at 9 a.m., Ruth Ellis was led to the gallows at Holloway Prison. Her final words were whispered to the prison chaplain, "I am guilty. I deserve to die." At exactly 9:01 a.m., the trapdoor beneath her feet opened, and Britain's last execution of a woman was complete. Even decades later, the case of Ruth Ellis still divides public opinion. Was she a cold-blooded killer, or was she a victim of a society that failed her? Many believe that her abusive relationships, her troubled past, and the manipulation of Desmond Cusson played a crucial role in her actions. In 2003, fresh evidence emerged suggesting that Cusson provided the gun and possibly coached her to kill. If this had been known at the time, would Ruth Ellis have faced a different fate? We may never know. But one thing is certain: her story remains one of the most infamous and tragic in British history. The execution of Ruth Ellis ignited a nationwide debate that ultimately led to the abolition of the death penalty in the UK in 1965. So, was Ruth Ellis truly a murderer, or was she a victim of her time? Let us know what you think in the comments.